I've been around a long time. I have lived through situations, I've got experience of events, so I don't have to go to links for reference.
We're going to try to keep the answers a little bit short.
I will not. I will not. You will have to do a lot of editing.
Okay, that's no problem. It seems like everybody wants to invade and occupy Cyprus. Why is that?
If you take a map and draw two diagonal lines, they're going to meet up on Cyprus. We are more or less the navel of the world. We are in the middle of Europe, the Middle East, Africa, so we are right on the crossroads. Strategically, it has been that way for thousands of years, and it hasn't changed. East the Mediterranean is of interest to everybody. It's the warm water port for the Russian fleet. It is what the Americans would like to think of as their private little pond. And the Sixth Fleet has been stationed in the Mediterranean since forever, since I can remember everywhere, anyway. And that is almost forever. So strategically, geographically, Cyprus is in the middle of everything. We seem to be an oasis in the middle of troubled waters.
How's everyday life?
Everyday life is peaceful. We do have a situation that is ongoing and has been ongoing for 44 years. 40% of the island is occupied, or at least is not available to us. 37.5% is occupied. Add to that another 2.5% of the Green Line, which is no man's land. So 40% has been lost to us. Both my family as well as my wife's family, we are what you would call displaced persons. We are no longer living where we were born and raised.
Where were you born?
In occupied Famagusta. And all of my relatives, both from my father's as well as my mother's side of the family, are from the north, from the occupied north. So we live in a city which is not ours, not the city we were born and raised in. For the last 44 years, efforts, inverted comma, have been made to resolve the situation, and every time we sit down for talks, the demands from Turkey, which is the invading country, simply increase. They want more and more in order to agree to a settlement.
Sounds a lot like you're in the same position as the Palestinians in many ways.
In many ways we are.
Is there a sense of fraternity with the Palestinian people here in Cyprus?
There's a lot of Palestinian refugees in Cyprus, and there is a lot of sympathy from the Cypriot people for the Palestinians. Cyprus as a government, the state was, I believe, the first to recognize Palestine as a UN country state a few years ago when it was given observer state. And the consulate, the Palestinian consulate, the next day became an embassy here on Cyprus. So yes, there is both sympathy from the people as well as from the government of Cyprus. Of course, governments, they have a different agenda, and nobody can claim that the Cyprus government will not deal with Israel. Israel is, after all, a recognized state, recognized by the UN state, and they cannot afford not to deal with a neighbor. There are different policies that are followed by the government, and there are sympathies which are expressed in private.
How Greek do you feel? Are you Greek or are you Cypriots?
I will not hesitate to answer for myself. I am a Greek. The term Cypriot doesn't mean any more than somebody coming from Crete being a Cretan, or somebody coming from Rhodes. It doesn't make him any less Greek. The fact that Cyprus became an independent state was imposed on us by the British when they left in 1959, after the struggle to get rid of the colonial powers. It doesn't change us from being Greeks. The fact that we now have a flag that was shoved down our throat, and they said you're an independent state now, and you have a different flag. Turkey to the north, and Turkey is already occupying a large chunk of Cyprus. We have Syria, Israel, Palestine to the east, and we have Egypt and Libya to the south. So anybody who understands international politics will understand what these countries, what they mean. in the region. Every one of them is involved in something at the moment. Cypriots have always been politically aware. We have always been interested in politics because the powers that be have always been interested in us because of our geographical location. Mostly about the powers that are interested in Cyprus. Cyprus was, after all, under the Ottoman Empire for about 500 years, and then under the British for another 70-odd years. Cyprus had been a Greek island for thousands of years. Cyprus, just like the rest of Greece, was occupied by the Ottomans. And in time, it took a long time, because we didn't have the support of our friends and allies, again, inverted commas, and we had to do it all ourselves with very little assistance. We eventually freed ourselves, but just because the Ottomans were here for a few centuries does not make Cyprus a Turkish island. Also the fact that the Cypriots did not abandon the land all the time they were under occupation. We were here, we struggled, we survived, we maintained our culture, and we are back.
How do you remember those days when you had to leave your home? What happened? When did you understand that, wow, there's something serious going on?
I was aware that something serious was going to happen days before. Just before the Turkish invasion, there was a lot of American dollars circulating in Cyprus. In fact, it was competing with the Cypriot currency at the time. That's when you know something is wrong.
How circulating, in what way?
In a lot of American aid, again the inverted commas, flowed into Cyprus at the time, and we knew something bad was going to go down. A few days later, the coup followed, which was predetermined by the United States. If anybody is interested, they can look up the classified documents, State Department documents. The coup was to provide a pretext for the invasion of the island by Turkey. It was agreed between the State Department, the Greek junta at the time, of the colonels who were ruling Greece at the time, a CIA-backed military government, and the Turkish military powers, that there would be the coup which would provide for the pretext for the invasion, and the Greeks will stay out or away from it. The Brits will not participate, and the Turks will simply walk in and take what they had agreed on.
Why?
There are two countries that America cannot punish. There are two great American allies. One of them is Saudi Arabia. No matter what they do, America can only pout them. They will not punish them because of the economic support that Saudi Arabia offers the United States, not just in purchasing weapons from them or any other services. It's the fact that the petrodollar is based in Saudi Arabia. The second country is Turkey, not for any economic reasons, but for strategic reasons. Turkey is the gatekeeper to the Black Sea, to the Bosporus Straits. No ship can go through the Bosporus Straits without the permission of the Turks. Russia cannot get into the Mediterranean unless it goes through the Bosporus Straits. And Turkey is a NATO country, which is very important strategically to the United States, and it's to NATO. We know of the history of Saudi Arabia and the way they treat dissidents. These are not the first people. Khashoggi is not the first person that go away with it. It's just that it went a lot further. The mainstream media got hold of it. Perhaps they wanted to harm Trump and his presidency. They wanted to see to put Trump in a difficult situation of having to punish somebody who is unpunishable. I think it just came up, and they decided, well, here's an opportunity. Khashoggi is a small, insignificant incident.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, why kill him? Why do it in this manner? Or was it just that they thought they were?
I don't think there was any reason. They thought they were going to get away with it in the same way as they get away with killing all dissidents in their country. And they were honestly surprised. They said, so what is the problem? I mean, it's only one man. To them, They fail to understand the sensitivities of the Europeans and the Westerners. I mean, it's only one man. Most Westerners are very sensitive to one individual. They will make a song and dance about one person with a name, with a little bit of a history. But you kill 100,000 children in Yemen.
They don't
and
care.
It's just a number. It's just a statistic. We've heard that before. We've seen it in Iraq. We've seen it in Syria. It's nothing new. But this guy has a name. He has a story because of the media.
But exactly. It seems
but
like
we all know the position of the media with regards to the American presidency, the current one. I think this just presented itself as an opportunity to pick on Trump. Perhaps they also have a bone to pick with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia did, after all, place an order for S-400 missiles from Russia. Now they also placed a deal to pay to invest $5 billion in an Arctic station with the Russians, some kind of a joint venture. So I think that there is the opportunity that presented itself, and they got hold of it. Nothing drops to the ground without it being picked up and examined to see whether we can get something out of it.
I think for the general public, they can't grasp to what length people of power are willing to go to get what it is they want to get. I mean,
that's because they have not experienced.
You have to believe it to see it. Before people start to understand and believe that it's actually possible that our leaders are capable of such malicious games and so detailed games, they won't see it. So what is the missing link in making people understand? Because all these things that you're talking about, it happens all the time.
They happen all the time, but they happen all the time in an area where people do not live.
But still, it's a game ongoing, and it's inflicting on everybody's lives. So how do we get the people? How do we get the general public to believe it so they can see it?
It's a struggle, and we can only work on one person at a time. If there are 5,000 of us that are actively disseminating information out there, and each one of us manages to win somebody over, then we have doubled. We do not have a political platform. We don't speak in public. We have social media for as long as they allow us to have it. They gave us social media for their own ends, and right now we are using it for ours. I see social media as giving us more of a benefit. It's more of a benefit to us, an asset, rather than a liability. I don't care if my details are known by the CIA through the social media. The CIA, if they were interested in me, they would have found out anyway. So I'm using the CIA now as opposed to MI5 or any other agency in the West.
Why should people consider your opinion?
I provide facts which are verifiable. I do not say believe what I tell you. I give them the facts and let them make up their own minds. Quite often I just leave them with a question.
How did we get to the point where people get offended by other people's opinion? Like, if you disagree, I will call you hateful.
It's not easy to accept that you are wrong in beliefs that you've held for so long. I can understand that side. I can understand it on the political view as well. If I was an American and I believed all the Hollywood hype of the Americans spreading democracy, we are the country of values, but because Hollywood drummed it into my head all these years and waving the American flag, all of a sudden I discovered that my country is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism. That would be a hard pill to swallow. So that would bring on denial to begin with. We have to go through the stages of what psychologists describe to us. A lot of people react in that way, and then they come back. They're obviously intrigued by what they saw. There must be something, and they looked it up. They wanted to verify, at least the intelligent ones. Those that are not intelligent, those who are firmly in a camp, and they say, this is my camp, good or bad, this is what I support. Trump, for good or bad, is the president, the current president of the United States. In all his in previous administrations that I can remember, as soon as the president won office, the opposition kept quiet. There would be some opposition in Congress and Senate, depending on who had the majority, but there was never this war declared against a current president in office. Trump is a phenomenon. I don't mean that to be a positive word or a negative word. He is a phenomenon. He stands out. He's larger than life. He's not a career politician. He brings it out in people. Some people love him, others hate him. I feel neither for him. Trump to me is a coarse person who is not a politician. He doesn't have the smoothness of Obama. He doesn't look good in a tux. He doesn't convey his message in a way that people would like to hear. This is what we get from a lot of Americans saying that Trump is a disgrace. What they mean is that Trump doesn't give the right picture. Obama did. Obama hugged his wife in public. Obama looked good. Obama was smooth. Obama won the Nobel before he even became president. The fact that Obama bombed 7 countries and killed hundreds of thousands of people, that's nothing. The image matters, and this is what Hollywood creates. The image is important.
I mean, most Europeans, they don't care about politics. And why do they get so excited about Trump? And obviously the press.
People listen to the mainstream media, despite the fact that they say, oh, you know, I got rid of my TV years ago and I don't. They do listen. They do look up on the internet what the Guardian says, what the New York Times says, and whatever. Quite often they say, well, give us a link to what you're saying. An unacceptable link. An unacceptable link for them would be a Western mainstream media link, whether it's coming from Washington Post, New York Times, The Guardian, or whatever. This is what they will accept, even though they say, well, you know, I'm looking at the alternative media. But if you don't trust the alternative media, and they are right in a way not to trust everything, because there's a lot of deliberate disinformation on the alternative media. And it's not necessarily provided by us. A lot of it is there, placed deliberately to make us look bad.
Yeah. So I think most people registered that something strange happened with Cyprus and banks, and we saw photographs of people standing in line to get their money out of the ATMs. But I don't think many people understand what actually happened and why and who was involved.
Over a 3-day weekend, initially we were told that Cyprus owed 5.8 billion euro. We thought that's not too bad. We didn't understand how, but yes, we can cover that. Then the 5.8 billion became 11 billion. It became 18 billion, and by the end of the 3-day weekend, we ended up owing 23 billion. When we tried to get information out of the central bank director refused to give that information to the government. The government threatened to fire the director, and that's where the European Central Bank stepped in, and they said you cannot fire him because he works for us, even though he had originally been appointed by the Cypriot government. That's when we realized that our central bank was not ours at all. And that should give an indication to people of what happened in Cyprus. It was a controlled experiment. The first bail-in, we have heard of bailouts, we have seen it in banks in the United States, we have seen it in banks in Europe. But the bail-in actually means that they take people's savings to pay for a debt we don't know where it came from.
A fake debt.
Well, I don't like to use the word fake. The thing is, it was never justified. The information was never volunteered where this debt came from.
But a state debt?
It was a state debt.
But how can they justify to take people's savings to pay a state debt? I don't understand.
They cannot. But they cannot. The thing is, when you deposit your money in the bank, you should read the small print. It says that you're actually trusting the bank to save your money for you. And if anything goes wrong with the bank, you can lose your money. Only 100,000, up to 100,000 is guaranteed by the European Union. Anything above that, you are likely to lose. There is no insurance for it. So by closing the second biggest bank in Cyprus, they can justify it because the bank closed, lost its money, lost your money, And you're only lucky you only lost 47.5% of your savings rather than all of it.
But did a lot of people in Cyprus have more than 100,000 euro in the bank?
Yes. Even if the money had been borrowed, as was the case with a friend of mine who borrowed 2 million to renovate an old hotel, they shaved almost half of that money that he borrowed, and he still owes the 2 million.
My
He
God.
lost one, or just under, but he still owes the 2 million, even though the money was borrowed money, it was a loan. There were a lot of companies that had money. It was not just private individuals that lost money. Cyprus, up to that Friday, had been a very affluent country. There was zero unemployment. In fact, there was less than zero unemployment. We were importing manual labor from overseas. Now, people are looking for jobs. There is an official, well, there was at one point 16% unemployment rate, which was unheard of in Cyprus.
When was this? What year was this?
6 years ago.
Yeah, so it can change like at the flip of a coin.
It changed over a 3-day weekend. After the 3-day weekend, Monday was a bank holiday, the banks did not open. The parliament voted against a haircut of savings. They were going to confiscate 10% of everybody's savings, and the parliament voted against it. So what happened was that when the president came back, it went up from 10% to 25% plus 22.5% that would be frozen indefinitely for perhaps another tranche of money that would go towards a loan. They said out of the 23 billion, you will pay the 13 billion out of your own money. The 10 billion would be loaned to you, 9 from the European Central Bank and 1 from the IMF, because we would like the IMF to be involved in this. So whether we like it or not, we were forced to. And if you don't like it, your currency is the euro, and there won't be any euros in your banks tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after before, or that, until you accept the terms given to you. For a long time, for obvious reasons, we had capital controls to prevent capital flight. But there were companies, even my own company, which was very small, only 5 employees. I couldn't draw enough money during the month to make payroll at the end of the month. I only have 5 people working for me, but when you have to queue up for hours to withdraw 300 euro, there aren't enough days in the month to draw enough money out to make payroll at the end of the month. And the worst of it is not just the capital controls, it was the fact that when we're dealing, importing, exporting, and you need money to move quickly from one place to another, because you have an order today and it has to be placed on time, you cannot wait for some committee to sit next week and review your order and decide whether they will grant you the letter of credit that will go out. In the old days, I would just pick up the phone and call my bank manager and say, send 50,000 to this manufacturer. And my shipment would be on the way within 48 hours. Now it takes them a week to sit and convene over your order and decide whether they will grant you that letter of credit, even if it's your money. And money disappeared from the marketplace anyway. People that owed us money, you'd call them, they'd pick up the phone, and they say, well, he owes me money, when I get it from him, I will pay you. And it's a whole chain. The chain effect, it just covered everybody. People were losing their jobs. People were getting a cut in salaries, 25% cut in salaries. Before that, we had a minimum guaranteed salary in Cyprus. That went by the wayside. Now, if you find a job, take it, don't discuss money, wait until the end of the month, see what they will pay you, and say thank you. And be grateful that you have a job. You'd be surprised at how many people are actually working for 350 euro a month. The minimum guaranteed by the government was 850 prior to the crisis. That no longer exists. Nobody guarantees what you will get. I know Northern Europeans may be totally unfamiliar, this would be alien to them. But Northern Europeans were not targeted.
But it could happen to any country, actually.
It can, but it has a tendency to happen to southern European countries like Italy. They have discussed, they hinted at a bail-in for Italy. The current Italian government, they said, forget it, you're not going to turn us into Greece, Greece being the classic example. And I will, since we are on camera now, tell you that for Greece, there was an Italian Prime Minister by the name of Massimo D'Alema, who was Prime Minister at the time that Greece got the first 250 billion loan. In a televised interview with English subtitles, he said, word for word, we set a trap for Greece and we robbed her. We gave that country 250 billion, 220 of which went directly to German, French, and to a lesser extent, Italian banks. But who's going to pay for the 250 billion? Not the German, French, or Italian banks. It is the Greek people who only a couple of years ago managed to pay off the revolution debt from 1821, almost 200 years ago. So how many centuries will this take before they pay off this debt? So what does that make the Greek people? It makes them a country, a nation on their knees and susceptible to whatever pressure comes from outside.
And who is outside?
A lot of theories are out there. I do believe there is a deep state. I'm not sure who is behind it, but I don't think that any temporary resident of the White House is at liberty to change the course plotted a long time ago by people that are there and they don't appear on your TV screen.
What's the motivation?
Power. War makes money, peace never has.
Yeah, but money for what? Money for what?
Money for power.
Power for what?
To put somebody in the White House.
Domination.
To control.
Yeah.
Exactly, domination. Why is Trump removing the United States from the treaty, the INF treaty with Russia signed by Gorbachev and Reagan?
And there is a clan of people who are really so insanely obsessed with dominating the rest of the world.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds like a cartoon.
It's the truth.
But the thing is, it does exist.
Do you see any hope for the world? For example, what happened in Cyprus? Could that have happened if you had your own currency?
It would have been more difficult. Cyprus was not really dependent on the European Union for economic reasons. Cyprus had always been, or since it became independent, it started getting very, very wealthy. A lot of Cypriots from the diaspora came back and they established businesses and they built, and Cyprus soon became a very wealthy country. At one point, it was said by somebody that we actually held sixth place for wealth per capita. There was hardly a house that didn't have a domestic help, somebody from a third country working to clean the house or look after the elderly or whatever. And that's gone. That is gone. People do not have enough money to employ other people.
But is that just because the flow of cash is not there?
A lot of foreign money was coming into Cyprus.
Yeah.
There was a lot of dirt about Cyprus laundering dirty money.
Yeah.
Cyprus was not the center for money laundering, not by a long shot. Banks like Deutsche Bank, Barclays Bank, HSBC, that have been proven to launder money, nothing very much has been said about it. They pay their fine and that's forgotten. What they came and did in Cyprus was they said, well, you know, you have a large banking sector. It's actually 8 times your GDP. So if something goes wrong, you won't be able to cover it. But countries like Luxembourg have a banking sector of 25 times their GDP. But that doesn't bother them. So at that time, Cyprus only had a corporate rate of 10%, which was the lowest in the EU. Even at this point, it only has 12.5%, which is still very low. I believe in Denmark it's something like 57%.
Yeah.
So a lot of foreign companies decided that Cyprus was a place to invest, to set up your head office, pay Cypriot tax at 12.5% or 10% as it was at that time. It was a great thing. And you've got the climate. And you're in the middle of everything. You're in the middle of the Middle East, North Africa, Europe. It's got good communications, it's got a good airport. So everything worked in their favor. Yes, of course, we do have a lot of offshore companies on Cyprus. And why not? The Greek loan, the Greek debt has benefited Germany to the tune of billions.
Yeah.
They actually make billions out of the Greek debt.
Yes.
So, somebody makes money out of it. Who came up with it? Perhaps the same people who want to make money out of it.
You know, somebody had to say, well, what if we took Cyprus? What if we, you know, somebody have to come up with the idea.
Cyprus was small enough.
Yeah. So is it a testing ground?
It was a guinea pig. It was a controlled experiment.
So
let's try the bail-in on Cyprus. Even if everything goes wrong, it will not affect the entire European Union. It's just too small.
How can Cyprus get out of this mess?
Cyprus is almost out of it in terms of government debt. That's almost paid off if it's not paid off already. But the damage has been done. A lot of small to middle-sized companies have closed down. People lost their money. They no longer have the money to start again, or they may be at an age now where they say, well, forget it.
Right.
Young people will have the opportunity in time. Things are not as easy as they used to be. There was the thing that money was too easy from the bank. Yes, it was, but it was facilitating businesses. In my small business, I had a credit facility of 300,000, which was a rotating facility, which means I borrowed 100,000 today, 10 days from now I put it back and borrowed some more money, and it actually gave me the opportunity to purchase things on time, and as soon as I got paid, the money went in, the bank was making money out of it, I was making money out of it, and everything was working smoothly. Now I cannot go to my bank manager and say I want an overdraft. He cannot even sign for 500 euro. They destroyed the economy. Most of the big investors who invested their money in Cyprus left. They now use European banks, the big ones, like Deutsche Bank that we mentioned earlier, like HSBC, like Barclays Bank. But they will not come to Cyprus because Cyprus has already been put under the knife.
So what can other countries learn from this?
I don't know if they have learned. I believe Italy has learned. At least the current Italian government seems to have learned. And they're determined not to fall into the same trap. We thought Cyprus going against Turkey is too small, but if we are part of the European Union, of one big family, we could face Turkey, not militarily, having the power of the European Union behind. And what happens? As soon as we join, they said, well, whatever problems you had with Turkey, they preceded your joining the European Union, so they're your problems, you sort them out. Turkey cannot be touched by America, it cannot be touched by Americans' vassals in Europe. Turkey is too important a NATO ally. There's not many powerful NATO allies other than the United States. Second one in line would be Turkey. The third one would be Greece, and then comes France and the UK. But they're very, very weak compared to what they were during the Second World War. The Greek government at the moment is probably the most treasonous government Greece has ever had. Even worse than the military junta of 1967 and 74. They are just giving everything away. They went into that room, that windowless room on that night as lions, and they came out as mice. They agreed to everything.
And why?
Well, somebody read the riot act to them. They probably told them what John Bolton told that UN official, that we know where your kids live.
It's at that level, huh?
It's dirty, and I believe it's dirtier than any mafia the world has ever known. At least the mafia has rules. They won't touch your family. These people don't. They will use everything at their disposal. They're ruthless.